Hey, Austin. We're
Oh,
live.
what's up? Oh, it's happening. What up, everybody? Welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast.
Show me the marmalade.
I knew that was
Show us
coming. I
freaking
knew that was
marmalade.
coming.
Let's do
I
it.
think that has got to be the theme of this episode. We're going to be talking about the marmalade sweetness that is the film Paddington 2. Of course, we'll dip into Paddington, the original, as well. But we're going to focus on what is the top rated fresh Rotten Tomatoes film of all time at 100 friggin%. It's
Oh yeah.
Paddington 2, 2017. Directed by Paul King and co-written by King and Simon Farnaby. If you're not British or you don't pay attention to British comedy, you don't know who Simon is, but he is freaking hilarious, as well as obviously a good screenwriter here. The film stars Ben Whishaw as the voice of Paddington, Hugh Bonneville, Sally Hawkins, one of my personal favorites, Brendan Gleeson, another one of my personal favorites, Julie Walters, Jim Broadbent, Peter Capaldi, another personal favorite, and of course, I guess a lot of our mother's favorites, Hugh Grant.
Yeah. One of mine too. Love you, Grant.
So, okay, let's let's skip a little bit of the hype stuff and let's just talk about our experiences when we first watched this film and then what has it been like on repeated viewings. Let's start with Ryan. Go ahead, talk about your experience with Paddington 2 and of course maybe Paddington the original.
Yeah, I'll just say both of them. I mean, to me, I guess the number one adjective when I think about these movies is delightful. Just sheer bliss, joy, and it's a kind of cinema that I wish happened more. Or, because it's definitely a family film that exists. It's not just for kids. In fact, in the first one, there's two kids in the family, but they're two of the characters we see the least. It's kind of about the bear and the dad a lot, which is interesting. But yeah, I just think that these movies are amazing. And the moment that I'll never forget from watching the two, in terms of because I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but the moment that he gets to Grand Central Station or whatever, and nobody notices him because they're all busy doing human shit, and then that's the moment I'm like,
Station, yeah.
yeah, or Paddington Station, yes. And that was the moment I'm like, oh, so in this world, a bear walking around is just normal, and I'm like, yeah, I love this universe already. They really set it up well. So yeah, I just love the world. I love Paddington. I love Marmalade now, and yeah, these movies are great.
Is that the scene when it's all dogs must be carried or whatever, however the sign is phrased, and so he misunderstands it?
That's a little later in the movie when he's with the family. They're going to where are they going to visit in the first film that they're trying to take the tunnel.
Oh, you're talking about
and
in the
they
first
decide to
film.
walk instead.
Oh,
yeah. Well, you mentioned the I think the dogs must be carried thing is in the first movie. I can't remember.
Yeah, and also I just love that you could basically sum the thrust of the plot of this film in Paddington trying to get a pop-up book, which is just also a delightful plot for a movie.
Yeah,
and going to prison in the meantime.
Yes. All right, Raymond, what about you, brother?
I gotta echo everything Ryan said. These movies are absolutely delightful. I saw them a while ago. My girlfriend's a huge fan of them, and she was excited we were doing this on the podcast. As I kind of mentioned before, having watched the first and second one, I think as a double feature a while ago.
Nice.
There was a little bit that was muddy in my head about what gags happened in which movie, and I knew the basic premise for number 2 was the pop-up book, but I couldn't quite remember what the basic crux of the first one was. So these were a pleasure to rewatch to get them fresh in my mind before the podcast. These movies are so much better than they have any right to be. They kind of remind me of the Lego movie in that regard, where it's like this should you expect to know what this thing is before you turn it on. That it's just going to be some cheap movie, aimed at kids. It's going to be maybe not necessarily lowbrow humor, but not necessarily the most sophisticated sort of approach. And I think that it's kind of amazing that they not only have such an entertaining and funny script, both of these movies, but they also work in some more serious themes. Especially
Totally.
regarding Paddington's status as like an immigrant and existing kind of on the
Mm.
margins of London in the first one, and then in the second one, they kind of get into like what it means to reform and like how a society can better function just by acknowledging the decency and dignity of other humans. And I think these movies are wonderful. I think they have a great message at their center, and kids could do a whole heck of a lot worse than watching these films. And on top of that, they do a nice job of introducing some of the vernacular of silent comedians like Buster Keaton, whom we mentioned last week, and Charlie Chaplin, especially in the second one. There's a direct allusion to Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, and I'm always for helping kids have like an access point to older movies like that. So all around, 2 thumbs up. I'm glad that Paddington 2 is our new Citizen Kane. It has taken its place as the greatest movie of all time, and we must adore it.
As it should.
Yeah, I think I love the way that you said it. Like, these films have no right to be as wonderful as they are. And with that said, I think for me, the first time that I got exposed to them was by being recommended from a director friend of mine who I think is he's a cinephile and he has an encyclopedic knowledge of cinema, but at the same time, he's also very edgy as a filmmaker. And if you met him and you saw the product that he produces, you might not think, oh, this man would be a shill for the Paddington franchise. But he was like, no, these movies are beyond delightful. They're absolutely perfect in what it is that they're presenting. You have to see them. So I was like, oh, shoot, okay, I guess I got to check this out. So that was kind of my entry into it, and I wasn't disappointed. I will say this, though. I actually do think that the second one is markedly better than the first one.
I would
That isn't
agree.
that the first, yeah, it's not that the first one is bad, but the second one is just stellar, I think. And I even found myself as I was rewatching it last night, kind of just laughing, not just at the film, but laughing at how does this work so well? Like, how
Yeah.
is this humor so good, but it's not forced? And how is this story so heartwarming and sentimental, and but without it being like cheesy and saccharine? And so I almost don't even know. Like, I don't even know what the formula is, but it feels like people should just watch it and study to try to figure out, okay,
Yeah.
so that's how you can do humor, that's how you can do sweetness, that's how you can do heartwarming without it running into a lot of the tropes that we
And
oftentimes like
the script
lambast.
is tight as a drum too. I mean, it's
Yes.
all action and reaction, therefore and but, like every single element of this movie, there's nothing out of place. Everything leads to the next scene very clearly, and there's a clear sense of story momentum that's always building. It's just really, really wonderfully scripted and structured.
And cinematically, the director, who I think had done like The Mighty Boosh beforehand,
Yeah.
like then goes and makes this movie. I think that is kind of what really grounds it, because every you were talking about the writing being so efficient. The shots are so efficient too. There's a long camera angle. The long shots that are hitting every single member of the family doing something in their everyday life, but also capturing the environment and stuff. He's doing all sorts of weird, camera tricks, and then also subjective, weird, cool visual effects, sometimes practical effects. That crazy miniature shot that Hereditary ripped off of Paddington. You did it.
Yeah, the
You
dollhouse
ripped off
there.
Paddington. Yeah, the dollhouse effect. I think that all, a great script with great directing for a batshit crazy kids concept movie. It came together. The Secret Sauce did, and Sally Hawkins rocks.
So a wonderful.
Well, cool. Well, let's
film. Yeah.
let's jump into the recap, and then we can start peeling things apart and trying to figure out what the magical recipe actually is. So, Paddington 2, the recap is that Paddington has settled into a cozy life with the Brown family in Windsor Gardens, where he is a beloved member of the local community. Now, to purchase a unique pop-up book for his Aunt Lucy's 100th birthday, he performs all sorts of odd jobs and saves his wages, but unfortunately the book gets stolen. So Paddington chases the crook, but he ends up getting arrested himself when the thief vanishes into the night, making it look as though he had actually stolen the item. The thief is then revealed to be the famous actor Phoenix Buchanan, played by Hugh Grant in maybe his best role ever,
Oh yeah,
who stole
hands
the
down.
book who stole the book, believing that it will lead him to a secret treasure. Meanwhile, Paddington is sentenced to time in prison, where he befriends many inmates. He even softens the hardest of hearts, in the form of the prison chef Knuckles, by sharing his recipe for marmalade sandwiches. While in prison, Paddington begins to lose his hope, however, that he will ever be reconnected with the Brown family. But they have not actually given up hope, and they follow clues leading them to suspect that Buchanan is, in fact, the thief. Now, because Paddington thinks the Browns have forgotten about him, he decides to join Knuckles and a few other inmates in a prison break. While out, he ends up contacting the Browns by phone, and they explain everything to him. They then hatch a plan to try to trap Buchanan. While on this train to catch Buchanan, however, it derails and it ends up in a nearby river. But just before Paddington runs out of air while he's underwater, Knuckles and the other escaped inmates come to the rescue. Paddington ends up falling sick and then goes into a coma, but he wakes up on Lucy's birthday and he learns that he's been exonerated, that Buchanan has been arrested, and just at that time, Aunt Lucy shows up in London. He goes to the door and greets her, all is well. But before the film closes for a final dose of marmalade sweetness, during the credits, we learn that Knuckles and crew are pardoned. Knuckles opens up a sandwich business. Buchanan is sentenced to 10 years in prison. And we see that while he's in prison, he performs for the inmates. Okay. Let's jump into some of the themes of this film. So yeah, 100% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Everybody seems to at least think that this is fresh, right? Now, obviously, we know that Rotten Tomatoes is an aggregator. It doesn't mean that everyone gives it a 10 out of 10. But the point is that everyone gives it a, yeah, this movie is
everyone
good.
gave this a 100 out of 100. That is how Rotten Tomatoes works. Everyone believes this is the greatest movie of all time. Therefore, it is.
It is, yes. But why does this film just work for everybody? The coldest of hearts, the warmest of sentimental hearts. What does this film do so well?
2 words: talking animals, Austin. Literally,
yeah, Joy.
It's all you need.
Joy commented in our podcast thread when we were deciding on the thumbnail for this episode. She said, "OMG, why is he so cute?" And I responded with something like, "He's a bear dressed as a person, Joy." Like you can't help but win with this guy. But I was actually reminded on this rewatch of these films of another piece of pop culture I recently took in, which was Ted Lasso with Jason Sudeikis. That they talk a lot in that show about like the lasso effect, that you drop this person who just radiates decency into this very cold and cynical world, and you just sort of like watch as he infects all of them with his own more sort of cheerful or at least decent worldview. And I think that's kind of one of the things that makes this movie so effective, is just it's so refreshingly earnest. You don't get a lot of movies that allow themselves to go in that direction. You know, we sort of touched on this a little bit with Justice League, not necessarily that I would put that movie in the same category as this one, but it is kind of refreshing to see Zack Snyder's take on superheroes, because it is so sincere, whereas all the Marvel movies are constantly undercutting those really big, sincere moments with like a joke or an aside that sort of like winks at the audience and lets them know they're in on the joke. Whereas this one is just like they're never undercutting it. They're never trying to play it cool or anything. They understand
there's no ironic detachment. There's no meta commentary. It's just in it. Sincerity. Yeah, the hilt. Yeah.
I was even reading an interview with Paul King where he said something about how much of a challenge it kind of was to write these movies, because the challenge with Paddington is that he is what everyone should aspire to be. So putting him at the center of your movie, you kind of worry that like, oh, I can't really take this guy on an emotional arc because he starts off as this kind, decent, warm, loving fellow, and he ends as all of the above. Like,
Right.
so it is kind of cool to see how he bounces off the characters around him and slowly softens their hearts, whether it's Hugh Bonneville or Peter Capaldi, who unfortunately gets kind of a character reset in the second movie. It seems like he's kind of coming around to the Paddington way of thought, at least at the end of the first movie. He kind of has a redemption moment. That's maybe the one thing I would say I'm not too crazy about with Paddington 2, although it does enable some good hijinks and good drama, is that I think Peter Capaldi getting a hard reset and being like Paddington at the beginning of the second one maybe does his character a disservice after what he goes through in the first one. But that's pretty much the only one nit that I can pick.
I'm glad you brought up the kind of trope of character enters into a situation and radiates to everyone around them, because I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but my basically two favorite movies of all time are Cool Hand Luke and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which that is their story. It's guy goes into a system, and then everyone else, it rubs off on everyone else, and that's kind of the Paddington story, but for children, obviously. And it's funny you mentioned the ending, because at the end of Cool Hand Luke, I think you could argue that Cool Hand Luke really hasn't changed. Everyone else, he's changed everyone else, and he's just running away, essentially, or trying to escape. And then Paddington, same kind of thing. They almost have, I guess, kind of a Cool Hand Luke vibe, because he goes to prison in this movie.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah. So I love that, and then also about just the fact that it's for children, I think really makes that story resonate. And like you said, they do a great job of dealing with these really intense themes, but with tons of nuance. Like I love how the parents have completely different worldviews and ideologies. The dad who's super into crunching numbers and kind of pessimistic and cynical. The mom who's super open, warm-hearted, sometimes to a fault. Let's just Paddington go insane. I think that's an interesting dichotomy to show to kids, and how there are both pros and cons to both of those worldviews, and then kind of seeing how it plays out with Paddington and as a wrench in the system. So
yeah, it's interesting, because if you start to think about it, though, the whole idea of there's a very simple principle, right? Like, be a good person. It's like the butterfly effect. Be a good person, and that will have ripple effects beyond what you even realize. And we hear this sort of thing a lot, like just in your going, that if you're just decent and kind and loving and non-judgmental, then it will somehow have this like far-reaching set of effects on people, and you may not realize the impact that you have on people, which could sound very sort of like kind of that's kind of simple, and maybe your cynical mind can be like, but what about other exploitative power systems, and what about, whatever, right? You can kind of like shit on it, but this film doesn't let you get away with that at all. Yeah. So I'm sitting here and I'm trying to think. I'm like, okay, so then let's figure this out. What is the recipe? Like, who is this bear, and what can we say about his characteristics that make it so that like any cynical person, if they tried to be like, but wait a second, what about, you're like, no, this is the magical elixir right here. And I wrote down, and this is all I could get so far, and you have to help me figure this out. Okay, so he never judges people. He always sees the good in people. He always sees the possibility in people, right? Like even Knuckles. Everybody else is afraid of him, but he doesn't accept that. He doesn't accept the prejudice, the bias. He's like, no, even the hardest of hearts can be softened. He didn't know that it would be a marmalade sandwich, but everyone has that thing that is going to shake them out of their kind of trapped stage, or whatever. That's the idea.
Paddington's words, if you look for the good in people, you're likely to find it, or something like that.
Yeah. He's always willing to help. He's always willing to help. There's like a selflessness. And then this is one of the ones that I thought was maybe the most interesting. He has a childlike wonder and appreciation for the world. And I think there's something in this. There is an educator named Sir Ken Robinson who writes a lot about how our education system stifles this childlike wonder and our imagination. And he cites this one famous example, and I don't remember the details, so I'm going to butcher the details, but just the broad strokes will get the point. It's like a group of 4-year-olds were given a paperclip, and they were like, what can you do with this paperclip? And the 4-year-olds could come up with like 100 different things that you could do with a paperclip. And then they asked a group of like 10-year-olds, and they could come up with like 50. And then a group of like 15-year-olds, and they can come up with like 10. And then they asked like a bunch of adults, what can you do with this paperclip? And they're like, it's just a fucking paperclip. Like, you use it to hold paper together. And he was like, this decline in imagination is something that our education system, that our society actually contributes to. So there's something about this ability to see beyond the bounds of kind of like what the status quo offers or what we're used to in everyday life. And maybe that's kind of one of the things that is so magical about Paddington. It's that openness to wonder and possibility that really makes it so that he never feels like there's an obstacle that can't be addressed, that there isn't like a person that you can't reach. Does that make sense? I think, yeah.
And they do such a lovely job of incorporating those themes by kind of illustrating how the simple act of washing a window can bring someone to that window, and then they can find something outside. Like, this comes back to how this film is structured, that there is this really kind of beautiful, simple sophistication to it, that everything is a reaction to something else. That, like, as much as they have those kind of Rube Goldberg sequences where, Paddington fills up the bucket of water and then he has to pick up the plant to counterweight the bucket of water, or when he's shaving hair at the barber and things get caught in the fan and things like that. They apply that same kind of logic to like emotional development in a way, and it reminds me a little bit of I think I may have cited this before on the podcast, but there's an old saying, and I can't remember exactly to whom it's attributed, about filmmaking as an art form, and really just art in general, that art may not be able to change someone's mind, but it may be able to change their heart, and then their heart can change their mind for you. And that is kind of the ethos of Paddington, that like he's just creating these opportunities. I think the second one especially is so good at illustrating this, how in that opening sequence in the morning where he's sort of passed from person to person and he reminds the one neighbor to grab his keys and all of that. There's this really lovely kind of simplicity to that when it pays off at the end of the film, where they all realize how much he's contributed to the neighborhood just by being there and being mindful of the folks around him.
I think, I want to hop on everything you guys just said, and that in terms of what resonates with everybody, like you guys are kind of alluding to, it's the little things in Paddington.
Yes.
And not only talking about you and just how cynical you could be about this movie and be like, okay, well, you can't be that happy all the time. It's like Paddington is just living day to day, and like you said, finding wonder in the little things and being nice to everybody around him. And I think it's the fact that, you can't control everything in life and society, and it's good and it's important to teach kids that, but you can be nice to everybody. You can, appreciate what you got, and then also be kind to others and whatever. And then just the act of doing that rubs off on other people. And I think that it's just a cool way that they did it in this movie.
And that in the movie's sense of generosity extends to essentially every character. Like by the end of it, Phoenix, the Hugh Grant character, who is once again phenomenal in this movie. I mean, he gets exactly what he wanted. He's happy as a clam in prison. Like, to him, he's been hunting down this treasure, but the treasure's always a means to an end. What he really wants to do is use that money to stage his one-man show. And when he finally gets to do that with his quote captive audience, he's like,
captive audience.
As he says, he's tickled the color of deepest shrimp or something like that. It's just, I love that sense of generosity, even to a character like that. It would be so easy to turn him into just, a mustache twirling villain and make him really cartoonish. And I think that is as much a credit to Hugh Grant's performance as it is to the script. That's a character that could have very easily become one-dimensional, but they treat him with the same decency that they treat every character.
Well, yeah, it's the kind of empathy. It's that everybody who is doing something has a want, right? So let's scrape beneath the surface here.
Yeah.
Let's not look at the symptom and how they're expressing it. Like maybe he's expressing it by trying to be a thief, by doing these things that he's using underhanded methods. But the ultimate goal is what? What is the ultimate goal? What is the real want? And if you can kind of scrape beneath that, then that's kind of a lovely one way of interacting with people. But yeah, it's a really good way also of building an antagonist, because like the best antagonists are the ones that you can empathize with, because you're like, oh, their goal is actually really similar to the protagonist. They both want connection, they want family, they want home, they want fulfillment. They just go about it by different means, and the way that they go about it conflict, right? And they run directly into each other.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Hugh Grant then. Okay, now growing up, my experience with Hugh Grant was, the guy from Notting Hill and all of the rom-coms before that. Yeah, I was just going to say exactly. So like that's the Hugh Grant that I remember. And then he kind of disappeared for a while. And he was gone for, well, yeah, that too. But I mean, he was still around after that, wasn't he? A little bit.
I don't know.
I don't remember. Yeah, but he kind of was gone in like the early 2000s, right? And then all of a sudden, like a fine wine, he has aged gracefully, and I think this like latter part of his career is kind of freaking awesome, and he's doing really good work. And this might be kind of one of the best things that I've seen him do. What do we think about Hugh Grant as Phoenix Buchanan?
I think he's the best. I mean, I've already gone on record as saying he's the best. There is a really great special feature about Hugh Grant as Phoenix on the Paddington 2 Blu-ray, where Paul King talks about how the character they had written it for Hugh Grant, even to the point that the character's name was Hugh when they were in development on it. And they said they were really scared about taking it to him because they didn't want to say, hey, we wrote this kind of washed up over the hill actor who's desperate to be back in the spot of you immediately. And they were very worried that his ego may get involved. And they said that he ate it up and was just like so generous with his contributions to the character, and that he would talk to the makeup and wardrobe professionals on the project, and that he was saying, no, we need a bald cap here. We need another wig. We need a mustache. Like, we need to really, do it up to the point where, like, the scene where he's dressed as a knight, he's in knight regalia with the helmet on and the closed visor, and he still has a fake mustache on under the helmet because he's playing a character. He's not just trying to blend in with the scenery. And there's just something really wonderful about how well that is all thought out. And on top of that, I would go so far as to say, like, out of curiosity, I looked up what was nominated for Best Supporting Actor this year, and he is number one with a bullet, and he's nowhere on the nominees list. It's got some other really, really good performances. I think Willem Dafoe in Florida Project was phenomenal that year, and Richard Jenkins in Shape of Water is very good. But my God, Hugh Grant in this is just... I don't think people realize how difficult this kind of role is, to do everything he's doing on top of having to act opposite a tennis ball. Like, he's just so good. But this is hogging the mic.
No, this is one of the difficult things about a film like this too, is that it gets all of us in the feels and we can have these conversations, but we oftentimes forget about the craft, right? Like, there's a lot of technical prowess that goes into the performances, the cinematography, the writing, et cetera, et cetera. But these films don't get the awards love because they're not self-serious, right? And there's probably something a little bit off with that, I think. Sure. I think there needs to be something changed about that. Ryan, sorry to cut you off, brother.
No, wait. What were you just saying, Raymond? I was going to go off on that, but I totally lost track.
He was one of the best supporting actors of the year, if not just one of the best performances of the year.
It's worth noting that that there was two different films that came out that in 2017 that featured Sally Hawkins and having an encounter with the sea monster underwater. Paddington and Shape of Water. I just had to put that trivia fact out there. Sorry, Austin. Go continue the podcast.
No, I mean that's it. It's more just. I wonder why it is that films like this don't get the type of critical love that. Like, why can't we
critical
take these
love?
Seriously?
This film has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's the most celebrated film of all time. It's dethroned Citizen Kane, Austin.
No, yeah, but I know
where
are the awards, man? How come?
I think that this movie is tough to pin down because there is a large subset of the movie-going population who think of animation as a genre and think of family film as a genre. And in some ways, those things are kind of siloed off. Not to say that this movie is, strictly animated, but I think that this movie has the kind of energy that most people have come to expect from an animated movie, whether it's, like I mentioned, the Lego movie or Pixar or DreamWorks. It has that sort of fun-loving, family-friendly appeal, and it's just kind of, if you'll pardon the pun, it's kind of a strange bear. Like when you get this thing in front of you, you can love it. You can have this huge reaction to it, but like you said, Austin, if it doesn't signal to the audience that it is a serious film and needs to be taken seriously, then and also they're not exactly campaigning for it. They're not out there pounding the pavement trying to get people to consider this in that light. But I think in a just world, absolutely but it's just kind of caught between what people expect from a family film, which is animation, and what people expect from an awards film, which is big, dramatic, heavy lifting.
Lots of tears, lots of fighting, lots of people dying. That's what we want in our awards films. That's what we want.
Fuck awards.
Yeah, exactly. I tweeted out as I was watching this, and I just said, listen, British humor is just better. I'm sorry, America, to my fellow compatriots. And I was like, and I won't be taking questions at this time. But I obviously grew up in the States. I'm from the LA area. And then I lived in Europe, in the UK mostly for about 10 years. Obviously now I live in Australia. But I really grew fond of British humor while being there. And the Brits love to say that Americans don't get sarcasm and dry humor, and they constantly tease us for that, right? There is something very particular about a British sensibility, British humorous sensibility, that just seems to work with a film like this as well. And I think this is another part of the magical elixir, because I think that if this were a studio film set in New York or Los Angeles, and it had a lot of the writing and formulaic hallmarks of American cinema, I don't know that it would work. And I don't exactly know how to articulate it, but it's more just a sense that I get. What do y'all think about that?
100% agree. This would not work as an American film. I would do some pushback because, at least for me, maybe I'm not watching the right British comedy. I, of course, love Monty Python to death. But then that and Paddington, I think I can't name any other British comedy that I love, like a lot of people. In fact, I would say some of it irritates me. Sorry.
In-Betweeners, IT Crowd.
Yeah.
I mean,
Blackadder.
Even the British Office, I don't love as much as everyone else. But different strokes for different folks. But Paddington, I think and I think it comes back to it being a kids movie in a way, and being about a talking fucking bear, and just the great script and the worldview and the amazing cinematography and whatever, all that stuff. Yeah, I can't imagine it being any other sensibility than being set in Britain and having all these British people be British and funny. You're right, and I can't put my finger on it either. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, there is something particular to the setting that I think enables this character to have the most desired effect. Paul King even commented on that in an interview, that he was saying it kind of has to be in London because London has that sort of stiff upper lip, and there's this expectation of not just manners and decency and propriety, but there's also this kind of self-seriousness. And when you send Paddington out into that world to let everyone know, hey, you can come down a few pegs, no one's going to think any less of you if you loosen up and enjoy yourself a little bit and enjoy the world around you. He was talking about how the interplay of those sort of forces was really interesting to him in the writing process.
Yeah, that's a very good point too. London is an interesting city because it's a little bit more insular than if you get out into outside of the greater London area. If you get into rural England, where people do get a little bit more community-like and a little bit more quote-unquote friendly. But in London, it's very much a heads down, kind of like New York, heads down. You're walking to where you gotta go, and you're not like stopping along the way to be like, hey, nice day, hello there. Where I'm from in Orange County, though, it is like that. You just walk around because life is so freaking sunny and glorious and everyone's upper middle class and pretty. You just kind of are like walking around doing the constant head nod to everyone like, hey, what's up? Life is good, right? Oh, it's 78 degrees with an offshore breeze again today. That sounds freaking lovely. Let's go get some bagels because we all have enough money in our bank accounts, right? So it's like, you don't get that juxtaposition that maybe causes some of the kind of points of tension maybe that make it interesting. I don't know.
This is a comedy of manners. You're right. You know, Paddington will give you the hard stare if you don't have the good manners.
Yeah.
There's something to what you just said for sure.
Yeah, maybe.
Fleabag was great.
Oh,
of course.
People have been blowing up the chat, throwing out some of their favorite British films, and a handful of them from Edgar Wright. I did want to comment when I was watching this one. Speaking of Hugh Grant, it reminded me a lot of Hot Fuzz with Timothy Dalton's performance in that, where it's like, I think Timothy Dalton says every single line in Hot Fuzz with the exact same inflection. He gives essentially the same line reading to every single line, but he makes it work. He's another British villain who could definitely be totally one note if such a great actor didn't bring him off the page so effectively.
What do you think are some of the best British films? What are they talking about here in the chat? What do we get,
man?
Well, a lot of folks talking about Edgar Wright in the chat there. A lot of folks talking about British television. They mentioned The Mighty Boosh, which we brought up as well. To comment on Simon Barnaby, the co-writer of Paddington 2, who also plays Barry the security guard in both Paddington films. I just want to take like a brief appreciation moment for him in these movies, because I've seen these twice now, and every single time that they introduce the scene, and this maybe is something that kind of cuts against American comedy, where they introduce the scene with Hugh Bonneville in drag and then Hugh Grant in drag in Paddington 2. In an American film, you kind of see where that joke is going, that he's going to encounter them and it's going to be a joke about their looks or something. And in this one, they just flip that right on its head, but it feels like so inspired, even though it's the simplest thing you could imagine to do, which is that you have Simon Barnaby show up, and he is like so over the top and exaggerated in his effusiveness for how beautiful these women are, to the point that like his final line in both movies is a variation on "Stop that beautiful ex," and I think in Paddington 2 he says, "Someone stop that stunning sister." Like even in his moment of desperation, he has to let everyone know how incredibly gorgeous these women are. And there is something to that I think does kind of reflect a British sensibility to just like turn the irony knob all the way up to the point where it comes back around to earnestness. You're just like fucking cranking the irony knob until it hits 360 degrees. And it just, it like every single time those sequences they kill me.
What do we think about the craft of this film? I know Ryan was talking a little bit about certain cinematography things. I mean, I think some of it has a little bit of like even Wes Anderson vibes, like some of the framing, you know?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Right? There's and obviously we just did Fantastic Mr. Fox, so there's kind of a similar vibe here. It just seems like that there's something about the form that needs to be paid attention to, that does some kind of service to the story. Does that mean it's a little bit quirky? Does that mean it's a little bit different? Like you can't imagine if this had like boatloads of like Paul Greengrass handheld like cuts, right? Like there's something about the relationship between the. Go ahead, yeah, Ryan.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
No,
off.
yeah, no, you're good. Jump in.
Well, I was going to say it did have a little Paul Greengrass stuff in the first one whenever the bear cave got fucked with, remember? And it's just kind of, it's like a war zone. It's like a Saving Private Ryan moment. Yeah. But I was just going to echo back kind of what I was saying before about how this is about everyday little things. It's about the little things in life. And the Wes Anderson sensibility, we'll call it, or aesthetic, really lends itself to capturing that, where you're setting up every little part and parcel of his house and every little part of the scene, and then you can kind of notice these little small details in the production design the more repetition that they show them, and that's just kind of a cool aesthetic that they totally copied from Wes Anderson. I'm sure he feels flattered about it, you know, and it's just a cool aesthetic for a kids movie for sure.
I just pulled up. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
No, I'm done.
I just pulled up an interview with.
This is the
Paul
most
King
polite
there.
podcast, by the way, ever. Everyone is like,
we're all taking from Paddington, yeah.
Oh yeah, he's rubbed off on us. After you, Raymond.
Speaking of Wes Anderson and the style overall, I wanted to pull this up just to make sure that I got it correctly. That there was this interview with Paul King where he said when he was imagining the finished film, he described it as having the comedy of Chaplin, the emotional complexity of Pixar, and it was all set in the world of Amélie. That said, there were lots of other films, photographs, and books that he referenced at various points along the way. He said he tended to think of Wes Anderson's formal angles for the scene where Paddington finds himself in very proper places where he feels out of place, sweeping Max O'Fuel's tracking shots, the colors of Jacques Demy, Tim Walker, the set designs of Tim Walker, and the sense of the alien in Sean Tan's work, to name but a few. He's someone who is... Yeah,
like this is a technical film, right? That's paying homage to cinema. This is a piece of art, but we don't think of it like that. Yeah.
And this is something that I comment on a lot. Maybe not necessarily on this podcast. I don't know that we've had the chance to talk about it, but there's something that I really love about the first Star Wars film, which is that it's samurai movies and westerns and World War II dogfights, all with the Joseph Campbell thread drawn through it. And now it kind of feels like all the Disney Star Wars movies are like, oh, it's some Star Wars with a little bit of Star Wars, and then just add some Star Wars to that, and then you've also got some Star Wars. And I think that there is something that really pops out to you when you see a movie like this where someone is clearly like not just trying to ape someone's style. He's not just trying to do Wes Anderson, but he's taken a little column A, a little column B, and he's putting it all through this machine to come out on the other side. When I was watching this, especially during like the marmalade making scenes and when they have those Rube Goldberg machines set up, and knowing that Paul King has been attached for a while to direct, I think it's a prequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's just called Wonka. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, probably my favorite movie of all time. And I'm never one to I'm never one to say that like, oh, a remake or a prequel ruined my childhood or it ruined my favorite movie, because I can just ignore the remakes and the prequels and what have you. But I'm genuinely excited to see what he does, artistic sensibility in a world like Willy Wonka. He seems to be well suited for that. And I think something that's nice about it is that I think the best remakes are movies that you can watch as like a double feature with the original and not feel like you're getting worn out on them. And someone with the earnestness of a Paul King, or at least the earnestness that he displays in these two films, I think would be a nice kind of like counterpoint to the sort of irony and sarcasm of Gene Wilder and Willy Wonka. But I digress. It's just it's really nice to see a filmmaker clearly drawing from the history of cinema rather than just trying to churn out what he thinks kids are going to like and letting the studio mandate everything.
Do you think there's going to be a third? Is there a third in the works?
Of course.
Yes, absolutely there is. Yeah.
Yeah, there has to be, right? Like,
no
has it
details
already been
out yet, but I think there's a teaser poster for it.
Okay. So in the third, what would you like to see happen? Since these characters do come back, does Buchanan have some sort of, like, he gets out on parole and now he becomes a part of Paddington's like crew? Like, what happens here?
Well, in the first one we had normal analog toothbrushes. The second one we had electric toothbrushes. I hope the third one they go, I don't know, maybe some kind of smart toothbrush, computerized toothbrush.
Steam
Internet of Things.
Toothbrush, just melting
Maybe it's
your face off.
Paddington navigating through the Internet of Things. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I do hope that the Hugh Grant gets out of jail and that, it'd be funny if every single movie this continues and the villain from the last one comes back as like a returned, rejuvenated person who has seen the error of their ways and becomes a Paddington person. But yeah, I don't know.
The credits when they show that Knuckles has a bakery or a sweet shop that he's set up. Not that I would think Knuckles would revert to his villainous ways or his surliness, but that was the first thing that I thought to myself, I really want to see in Paddington 3 is him going by Knuckles' sweet shop and reuniting with his old friend, maybe before he goes off on a new adventure. I I think that Hugh Grant is a much better villain than Nicole Kidman. No disrespect to Nicole Kidman, I just think this movie's a little bit tighter and it knows what to do with him a little bit better. But I would love to see Hugh Grant come back in this one, and I'm not sure that might happen considering Nicole Kidman's not in number 2. Maybe they want to keep on going, but I would like to see this universe start to kind of snowball a little bit and build on some of the things we've seen in the past rather than kind of like doing these isolated stories. Not that I'm complaining, because I really, really do love both of these movies.
Well,
maybe Knuckles reverts back to because he gets behind on his interest payments to the bank. And so he just in a moment of weakness, he does something, a little bit outside the bounds of legality. And so Paddington has to, one, rehabilitate him and then save the day somehow so that Knuckles' Sweet Shop or Knuckles' Bakery or whatever it's called can flourish once again and sell marmalade sandwiches.
Hey, we've got a good pitch right there.
I think Paddington's going to end up in Guantanamo Bay. You get tortured for an hour and a half. There's going to be a graphic like nipple torturing scene, and he's going to get marmalade dipped on him like Chinese water torture style. But also, what I really want, and what my cynical
stop that beautiful bomber.
My cynical Hollywood watching self is probably thinking that he's gonna probably maybe meet a lady bear at some point, have a little baby Paddington, and then we're gonna start the whole new trilogy all over again. Anyone think that that's a possibility?
I don't know, because I think the magic of Paddington is that he's a little cub,
So he's Bart Simpson. He never gets old. That probably makes sense. I'm not too versed in Paddington lore.
I also don't know that they'll make 4 or 5 or 6 of these.
They're going to make 1 million of these. I think this is one of the best things cinema's got going for kids.
Well, that's not to deride it in any way. I'm just saying that I think there is speaking of, kid shows recently, or not too recently, but a couple of years ago, I think one of the best shows on TV, Gravity Falls, which is a really fun show on Disney Channel. The creator of that, he did 2 seasons. I think it was 2 or 3 seasons. And at the end of it, he said, hey, they asked us if we'd be willing to do another one, and we kicked some ideas around. But at the end of the day, we're really happy with where these characters ended up. And I think that's also more reflective of a British sensibility, though, where they have so many much beloved shows that go for 2 6-episode seasons, and they quit while they're ahead.
You own the copyright to Paddington, a bear, just a money machine. The golden goose, the golden bear, like made $300 million or something that last movie did, which I think is good for that movie. I don't think you're going to stop at 3. You're going to keep going.
Maybe what you do is
I'm cynical.
3 films. It used to be like 6 seasons in a movie. Wasn't that the Community joke or whatever it is? But now it's the other way around. Maybe you do 3 films and then you go on to the streaming services, and then maybe every once in a while you make a holiday film or something like that, just to kind of come out.
Keep the cash cow.
But then, because the big thing is you got to keep the brand alive for video games and for merch and for other
Paddington first-person shooter,
and to maintain your copyright. Totally.
Yeah, or like Ryan's Paddington exploitation film. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up things there, and let's jump into our mailbag a little bit. We do want to let y'all know that if you want to call in and chat to us about your thoughts about Paddington, what do you love about Paddington? What's successful about British films, British humor, et cetera, or is there anybody out there that just doesn't like Paddington? I want to hear some hot takes, because this was a love fest. And even though it's 100% on Rotten Tomatoes on the critics' side, it's only at like 87% on the viewers' side. So that means that some people, some Scrooge-like people, have not thought that this film was good. So call us at 1-213-534-8807. That's 1-213-534-8807, and you can leave us a voicemail, and we'll address it on the episode. Or you can email us at movies@wisecrack.co. That's movies@wisecrack.co. We're going to go to our voicemails first. We have one voicemail from Jason on Nomadland. So Jason, go ahead and take it away, our friend.
Sorry, ignore that last message, please. What's up, Show Me the Meaning crew? This is Jason from Pittsburgh. I wanted to say about Nomadland that y'all did a couple weeks ago. I wasn't aware of content of the book.
I can't hear Jason.
Sorry, ignore that last
So
message,
let's
please.
go to
What's up,
the
Show Me the Meaning
email
crew? This is,
mailbag,
Jason
and
from Pittsburgh. I
we'll
wanted to
talk
say about
about.
Nomadland that y'all did
Oh wait, I think that was Jason. Was that Jason?
a couple weeks ago. I wasn't aware of content.
Those who are watching the stream know we've had a few little technical difficulties here and there, so I think we may just not be hearing it.
Had as far as how
they're hearing Jason and we're not hearing Jason.
I don't know.
Who's to say?
How about this?
Let me tune into the YouTube. Let me tune into the YouTube video.
No, screw it. We're just going straight into the email bag. We'll go into the email bag. So we've got a few emails talking about Mortal Kombat and other related things. So we'll first jump into Matt, who said, "Hey, SMTM crew, I just listened to the episode on Mortal Kombat and had a question. I've heard Michael Tucker explain that the success of James Cameron's two sequels, Aliens and Terminator 2, was in large part due to Cameron keeping the premise of the first movie, but changing the designing principle. Something I think the 95 Mortal Kombat did well was that it used the premise and characters of the game, but it changed the designing principle to that of a kung fu movie. Honestly, it was just a rewrite of Enter the Dragon. I liked that. Isn't this why the feudal Japan opening scene worked so well, where the fight between two iconic characters functioned within the designing principle of a samurai movie? Isn't this also why the rest of the film was just okay, where the story kept the designing principle of video game cutscenes, and then the quote was, I want longer cutscenes, said no one ever." So, yeah, what do you think?
I'm with him 100% on this one. I mean, that was kind of my argument going into this, is like you have this wealth of iconic characters with a really unique power set. Why bind them to? And once again, I know that this was a build up to a tournament. They're not technically in a tournament, but they are still essentially bound by the rules of a tournament. They're all siloed off into one-on-one fights. Like, I would have really loved to see how their power sets would have interacted with a more traditional story, whether it brought in the world from there, or hell, we're talking about Paddington as being seen as an outsider or a stranger in a strange land. Like, what kind of effect do their powers have on how the community perceives them, or how people at large perceive them? So I don't know. I feel like there could be a lot of potential, a lot of really cool potential for a Mortal Kombat universe. But I think if they keep on thinking so strictly inside the lines of what people expect from that franchise, I don't know, a lot of the movies are just going to keep feeling a little bit samey to me.
Ryan, any thoughts on this?
No, not really. I would push back on the whole James Cameron thing. I mean, his movies are successful, yes, because he switched it up a little bit. But I mean, he's just such an incredible writer. It kind of relates to Paddington, just how no scene is meaningless. Like every scene, every piece of dialogue, he's such a tight writer in all of his projects that, yeah, it's just I think that made Terminator 2 good. But yeah, Mortal Kombat, the new one, whatever.
Yeah.
As to the James Cameron of it all, I think what he might be hitting on there, or what he was saying essentially, is that he didn't just do Alien on a new ship, on a bigger ship. It's, there's some variation in one sci-fi and horror, the other one's kind of action sci-fi, and then Terminator kind of switches the formula again with Arnold being the good guy. And I get where he's coming from.
I'm basically agreeing with him in the sense that but I'm just saying that I don't think that that's the core reason that succeeded, was that they switched the formula up. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. We have another one from Steve on Mortal Kombat, and this is just an anecdote, but I really thought this was kind of fun. So we can talk about some of the fun parts of what Mortal Kombat can do for its viewers. So Steve wrote, "I got an anecdote for you. While visiting my mother, I got her to watch the movie, and she had the exact same reaction of the first scene as I did. Who gives a shit about those ninjas? What about the baby? The next night, I'm cooking dinner, and she's chopping up a salad, and I hear, yeah, as she rips the core out of a head of lettuce and holds it, saying, Kano wins. She's 70, by the way.
Grandma sounds awesome.
Mother.
Oh, mother. Sounds awesome.
Yes, yeah. So, sometimes even in the silly things, we can enjoy fun, and it can stay with us for a long time. And then the last thing I'll say before we get out, we just got a message from Tumelo. I hope I'm saying that right. It's a Sotho name meaning faith in South Africa. It says, I'm a big fan of the show. I have some recommendations that I hope you guys can do one day. And I just wanted to throw these out there because I love kind of thinking about, these are films that we could definitely cover, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Exterminating Angel.
Okay.
Stalker.
Yeah.
True
Nice.
Romance.
Hell yeah.
Notorious, the Hitchcock one, not the Notorious B.I.G. one. Vertigo, McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
Just watch
Boyhood, Punch Drunk Love, Pulp Fiction, and Seven Samurai. And now I just want to say that all of these, or most of these, are definitely films that we have at some point considered. So what do you think? From this list, is there anything that you're kind of like, yeah, we definitely, we got to do that one?
Have we not done Pulp Fiction yet?
I can't believe no.
I don't know that y'all have done any Tarantino before. I'm trying to
We
think.
have to have done a Tarantino.
Yeah.
Way. We've done
Or you
like
did Once Upon a Time in
Django.
Hollywood when that came out, right?
And we did Django too.
So maybe you just
Django,
did the new ones as they were coming out.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I just did a podcast talking about Death Proof, which is my favorite Tarantino movie.
Dude, that's my least favorite. We have to be on a podcast about Tarantino together.
Let's come on air together and butt heads a little bit.
To be honest, go ahead, Ryan. Ryan.
I should say, of that list, True Romance, obviously Pulp Fiction. But I feel like it's that's everyone's favorite movie. But then Seven Samurai is a classic. I don't know if any of these new kids have seen that film, but it's great.
If we were going to do a Hitchcock film, I would campaign for Rope, though, because I feel like it gets a lot less love than some of the better known ones.
And that has a really good angle to sort of pick into for this show with regards to morality and just hubris and all that kind of, like that's a very fascinating study of psychology. I like Rope a lot.
Awesome. All right, so everybody, if you want to call us or email us, you can call us at 1-213-534-8807, or you can email us at movies@wisecrack.co. Where can everybody find you on the internet before we get out of here, Raymond?
You can find me on Twitter and Letterboxd. I'm at Crematoria, and if you head over there today, I actually just dropped 3 new short films on my YouTube page. I haven't updated in a long time, but very, very proud of some work that I've been doing lately, and just posted a thread with links to all 3 of those on my Twitter.
Amazing! Please go support independent filmmakers. All right, Ryan.
Ryan short. I just dropped a new Ryan short today. It's called Lowe's Ho. It's a music video about Lowe's, the hardware store. Got kicked out of a Lowe's to make it, so please go watch it. And Ryan Shorts online.
Awesome. Yeah, and you can check me out online. I've got my YouTube channel that I've been busy releasing stuff on. Just released a new video today about what is a nation state. Did one last week about how Disney Marvel films aren't cinema, engaging with Scorsese and some other stuff. And then did one a week before that about whether or not we're living in Black Mirror already. You know, the episode where they walk around and rate each other all the time, the nosedive episode. So I got all kinds of weird stuff out there. Just search my name, Austin Hayden, on the YouTube channel. Yeah. All right. Send us out, Ryan. Let's get out of here.
Goodbye from Hollywood, California. This has been Show Me the Marmalade. Be positive and good to each other. Pay it forward. Do what Paddington does.